This is the Best or Worst Podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Koji Stephen Sakai and M. Martin Mapoma.
Episode number 66, and I am Koji, and unfortunately my co-host Martin is dealing with some family issues, so he will not be here. So I'm doing solo duty. I think I can handle it. We'll see. So our society is so focused on celebrities, sometimes forget that, quote, regular people lead interesting lives too. Best or worst moment of your life. Hosts Koji, that's me, and Martin, who's not here today, are here to let your story out. We put people on the spot. What are you going to hear? It could be funny. It could be poignant. It could be sad. You'll know when we know. Best or Worst is a twice weekly podcast. On Tuesdays, which is today, we get to know our guests. On Thursdays, which is 2 days from now, we'll find out their best or worst moment. And today I am super, super excited to bring in actor Morley Nelson. Morley, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. We just recorded a Guy Code podcast, so unfortunately you might have to repeat some stuff. Sorry about that.
Well, after all that screaming, my voice is gone. You know, just yelling back and forth.
Although I think this episode comes out before the Guy Code one, so unfortunately they're not going to be able to listen to that one first. But why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? How did you become an actor?
So I was an actor. I was a theater major in college, and I was told by an advisor that I didn't have a traditional enough look. I wasn't European looking enough to do theater, because Shakespeare and up to Gilbert and Sullivan and everyone else, they wrote for a European look, and I didn't have that. So I was heartbroken at the time, and I figured, well, if I can't be an actor, then if I can't play a cop on TV, I'm going to become one. So I graduated and then went to grad school and got a degree in sociology, and then applied to be a cop and was a cop for 12 years, 11 months.
Wow.
And then while I was a cop, I had some pretty public cases, and someone reached out to me on Facebook and said, hey, we're shooting these movies. I don't know any cops. Could I interview you and talk to you about what it's like to be a detective? And this is somebody I went to high school with. And so I said, sure, why not? And at the time I thought, oh my gosh, based on who he was in high school, super nice guy. But I thought, oh, he's shooting on like 8mm in his basement. What is this going to be? So he called and we started talking, and he got more and more involved in it. And then it turned out that he was directing an M. Night Shyamalan produced movie.
Wow.
And so my wife and I were on our honeymoon, and I got an email saying, hey, can we fly you to Toronto, and could you be the technical advisor for this feature? Wow. And I was like, I'm not getting spit on or shot at. Great. Yeah, why not? So went up to Toronto and shot in Pinewood Studios. It was a fantastic experience. And then while I was there, there's another movie shooting, Red, with Bruce Willis and Morgan Freeman. And for whatever reason, their technical advisor was only on for 2 weeks, and apparently they needed more. So I got grabbed up because they shared the same office space at Pinewood. And then from there, I started doing, I got into doing The Walking Dead, Men in Black 3, just a lot of stuff. So, and then that led into, like, instead of, I do everything from taking a technical pass on a script and saying, okay, you can save time and budget if you did a sequence more like this, because it's not going to play well. Because, why have a shootout that's anticlimactic when you could build the shootout? Or cops don't think this way, or, a homicide scene doesn't look like this, and just stuff like that. And then up to being on set and either directing a sequence or helping actors. Most times helping actors get into why, not just how to do things, but why do you do things? Like, what's the motivation, and what are you feeling as a cop? And then that led to managers saying, instead of teaching other actors how to be a cop, you had like the ultimate method. Why don't you just act? And so that led into acting. And so I played a lot of bad guys. I played a lot of cops. It's been a great ride. I've been very fortunate.
Is it weird to play a cop when you were a police officer at one point?
Once I get past the whatever props they give me,
yeah,
and I get comfortable in those props, then no. because then it just feels like I'm really fortunate in the sense that I feel like, well, I'm barely even acting, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is so natural. Just say the lines, not just, you know what I mean? Not just say the lines. They're well written, much respect to the writers, but I think I have yet to have a script where I haven't at some point done what's been written in the script, or some kind of experience similar to that. So it's easy for me to go back, like I can't remember the method of acting where you I can't remember her name. It's not Adler, but anyhow.
Oh yeah.
I pull from a life experience and then just react to the physical environment around me and listen to the other actor and respond. And so that's been nice.
I can't believe that your professor told you that you shouldn't be an actor because you don't look. I mean, what year was this? Like around what year?
Right around 1990. We're talking like 99, 98,
Wow.
97, 98.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. But that's crazy.
Yeah. It was, he brought up, like, he was talking about Othello, like, you'd never cast a black person to play Othello. That was written for a white person to interpret the interdelicacy. I can't remember. It was like, he used such a weird term. I can't remember what it was, like delicacies or the internet. It wasn't like, you couldn't say turmoil. It was something strange. I was just like, what is this guy talking? Like, seriously? And he said, go ahead.
And the assumption is that there's only, like, Shakespeare is the only one that wrote anything. That no one. I mean, that's like, it's like, who was the representative from Iowa, King? He said, like, nothing's good hasn't come out, or nothing's good come from outside of Europe. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking? Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Like, you have no, like, you don't know. Like, I mean, so many things. I mean, so many of the things we use are not from Europe. Like,
right.
Crazy.
I mean, the Western,
right?
Yeah, I mean, here's this King, right? Like, talk about the ultimate American, right? I mean, where did the Western originate? Not Europe, or jazz or any. I mean, come on, give me a break. But some of the greatest playwrights have been American, right? Like,
But also, humans are weird in that, like if one side of the globe creates something, there'll be instantaneously another side, the person on the other side of the globe is creating something at the same time, completely separately, like geometry, stuff like that, or like these things were like charting the moon and everything before, like China wasn't talking to the Aztecs about it or the Mayans,
right?
But
right.
So it's. I mean, I think there's something about our consciousness that we're all doing it, but right now there's a lot of, like, only one side of the one group of countries are doing it only, which is kind of silly.
Right. I think, to your point, I think more than anything in the experience I've had in life, we're more similar than we are different. And I know right now, particularly, like, people like to focus on the differences.
Yeah.
But we are so similar when it comes down to it.
Right? Oh yeah, no, dude. The story I tell everybody is, during the Ice Ages, the human population came down to 3,000 people at one point.
Right.
Or sorry, came down to came down to 20,000 people at one point.
Okay. Still,
so that very small. That means all the people in the world today are descendants of those same 20,000 people, which means we're genetically almost exactly the same.
Yes.
Right? We're super similar. And even though we might physically look different from one another, like, we're closer than, like, two foxes who are, like, one that lived on the mainland and one that lives on, like, an island. Those foxes can't mate anymore because they're distinctive species now, right? But I can still hook up with a person and get them pregnant who's not Asian or Japanese.
Yeah.
Right. What? And so that's, like, this idea that we're so different is so silly. Like, to me, it's like, no, dude, we're basically the same. Like, genetically, we're exactly the same people. It's just we just happen to look a little bit different.
But why is it that, I'm going to make a pretty big generalization, but I think I'm right. Why is it that people that push purism most are the worst, most ridiculous human beings on the planet? Like, you're like, forget about, Darwin had, like, the survival of the fittest, but then also sexual, like natural selection and sexual selection. And he said sexual selection is a far more driver than natural selection.
Yeah.
Those are the last people on earth that any human being would mate with, right? But yet they're pushing this racial purity stuff. It's like, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the racial purity is super. I mean, like one thing I've always wanted, I've been playing around with it, is this idea that like if Asians treated white people like white people treat black people, like how it would look. Because if you look at statistically, Asian Americans are, in every category, we make more money, we're better educated, we commit less crimes, we have more money. Like in every like we should be the ones crossing the street when we see somebody. We should be the ones that are like locking the door or following them. But we don't, because that'd be crazy.
And the crazy thing too is that we make up more people on the planet than anyone else, but you would never have any clue to that based on how much colonization has affected filmmaking, right? Like unless you're watching strictly Japanese or Chinese or Korean films, you would have, I mean, even as an American, when I watch those, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird, there's no white people, right? But that's where you're still conditioned to thinking that white people are majority on the planet, and they're just not.
Although I think these kids are going to be different. I mean, I think our kids are going to be, I mean, like what was I was watching earlier this year before the COVID thing, one of the biggest hits was a song called Chicken Soup or something. Like it was a crazy song where it was like a K-pop guy and a Latina, and so they were singing and rapping in Korean, Spanish, and English.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the number. I was like, this is the number one hit. This is crazy, because like when we were kids, like that would be impossible. Like there's zero chance that's happening, right? But now it's like these kids could watch this and they're like, oh, this is dope. Like,
in fact, we watched on Netflix for movie night. We watched like a Babysitter's Guide to, we watched that too last Friday. But it was like Babysitter's Guide to Monster Hunting or something, and the cast was almost exclusively not white. Yeah, there's like a white mom or something, but it was kind of like my wife and I were like, if you notice, there's hardly any, like it's such a shock. Yeah. Where you're just like, wow, an American movie where the heroes are actually not white. And so that's still, to me, it's still a little shocking. And in fact, I don't know about you, but even up to maybe 5 years ago, if I saw an Asian character on television without an accent, or that wasn't working at a convenience store or a restaurant, or whose parents, the storyline was their parents owned a restaurant, it was a shock, right? Like we're constantly the immigrant, we're the perpetual immigrants, right?
But TV is more diverse now than it used to be. Yeah. But film is still pretty behind the game on that one. Oh yeah. When I watch movies of Hawaii, I'm like, wait, there's no Asian people. Like everyone in Hawaii is like Kappa or Asian, or Pacific Islander. Like they're the cool people.
Right.
Like in this movie, there's no Asian people in this movie.
Like Aloha. What was that? Like, are you serious? What island did I miss where it's completely 90% white?
Maui's like that though. Maui's probably the
right. Yeah, I suppose all the tourists.
That's like the Orange County of Hawaii. I hate. Yeah. Like, Maui is like terrible. It's my least favorite island. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, they have a Costco, right? Like,
well, I think a lot of them have Costco's, but
that's true.
It's just a terrible, like very like there's no like culture there.
No, it feels like, oh wait, you can still go do the mountain hike in the morning and see the sunset, right?
Yeah. I think you can bike down too.
That's true. I think the weird thing to me is getting like casting calls for. So I'm and not in any particular order, and I'm not going to tell you what type either, but I'm Black, Asian, and white, right? Oh, wow. And so a lot of people, it's interesting because I get from a lot of Asians, I'll get your white passing, and I'll get from a lot of Black people, like you're like sometimes someone's like, do you have some African in you? And I'm, so I'm always amazed that African Americans can see that. Yeah. But a lot of times and to be 100% fair too, we have total colorism, right? Like the darker the harder, for sure, when it comes to African Americans. But when it comes to Asians, I have never been mistaken for white ever in my entire life. Like I have never passed for white from other white white people, right? And so I always find it interesting when I see castings for the ones that I can apply for. Like I never apply for anything black because there's not enough roles to begin with for really dark black actors. Let alone, I mean, there's a ton for lighter skinned black actors, but I would never in a million years, even though technically I could. But the thing that bothers me the most is for Asian roles, is that it's the only ethnicity where it says must be of Korean descent, or must be of Japanese descent, or must be of Chinese descent. It's like I've yet to see a casting that says must be of Italian descent or must be of Scottish descent.
Yeah.
Like,
Although,
like
personally, as an Asian American filmmaker, my philosophy is always open Asian casting, only because
yes,
you can't, there's so few Japanese roles,
right,
like that. It's unfair to be like, only Japanese people could do this or only Chinese people could do
right,
it. Just like, we should open it to all Asian people. Because
yes,
even if it's like a Chinese story, I'm like, I'm
yeah,
okay with being all like pan Asian, because it's too hard to be like trying to
no,
parse it out. And there's not enough roles, frankly, for people
no.
to do it.
Like I think it feels like 80% of what I audition for when I see the actual film come out, it ends up being a white guy. Like it's like, why? And I think a lot of it has to do with maybe best intentions, where a director or the writer director or the writer, they don't really have their white, not to without any ill intentions. The only Asian they've ever seen is like the guy at the corner store or their neighbor, right? And so in their head, they're like, oh, what I'm looking for is my neighbor, without knowing that their neighbor's Cambodian, right?
Sure.
And so they cast for Chinese because they think every Asian, oh, he must be Chinese, right? So they get must be of Chinese descent. And then they see the 10 Chinese actors, right? And he's just like, that's just not the essence of my neighbor. My neighbor doesn't sound like that. He doesn't look like that. He doesn't, whatever, right? And then they say, well, it's just too tough to cast. Let's recast it, right? I think a lot of that
I think
happens.
you give them too much credit, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'm saying best intentions, right? I think, right. I think worst intentions is, and I think something that I learned, I've only been acting for a short amount of time, but something I learned was that, that a lot of times, depending on the size of the film, no one will cast you unless you've been in at least two things, right? Because you're a risk. Like how are you going to handle acting across from an A-list actor if we don't know if you've ever acted from across from an A-list actor?
That's not the only thing. As a producer, I can tell you that as a producer, there's two things we're looking for, right? One is a talent with a name, and another one's breaking somebody, right? Like somebody who's never done anything. Yeah. But the problem with breaking somebody that's never done anything is I have to either, if it's like a studio movie, I have to defend it to a studio, or if it's a investor, like a private thing, I have to push that, like, this person is, even though you've never heard of them before, he's amazing.
Right.
And a lot of times it's easier to be like, oh, that Asian dude on CSI? Oh yeah. Like he's in the movie. And you're like, oh, he's on CSI, he must be good. And so it's interesting because I think that, like, so like in auditions and stuff, what I always tell actors is, you got to come in so hard that I'm willing to go to bat for you.
Right.
Like, I'm willing to go to bat and be like, we're making this movie with this dude, even though because he's so amazing that he's gonna like unless it's like a $5,000 movie, then who cares at that point?
Right.
But if it's like any movie that, like, with any kind of like real funding behind it, it's like, I need some name, I need some kind of recognition, And I think that's the challenge for a lot of Asian American actors, is just you don't get that opportunity. If you don't get that opportunity, it's hard for me to take a chance on you unless we're doing something for a zero budget.
Right.
But this has been a good talk. In the next episode, we're going to talk to you about the your best or worst moments. So start thinking about that. And for everybody listening, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. This is the way to help us move forward. And if you want, please send Martin some great wishes, and keep him in your prayers. All right. Thank you, guys. Peace out. All righty.